First thing I'd like to say, I've spoken many times about reincarnation, and there are many videos about reincarnation, but I would like to do a whole series of FAQs about reincarnation at some point. First thing I'd like to say is that reincarnation as taught on Earth currently is not true. Right? That's probably a good thing. And you can keep your mic with me if you want to comment through my. So let's look at the understanding of reincarnation that the Earth currently has, which I'm saying is not true. Shall we? Basically what it's saying is that people have some form of consciousness. It's a very loose definition because many people who believe in reincarnation don't know what that is. In the spirit world, so they are spirits. And here's the Earth, and at some point, whenever a new child is conceived, there is at some point the person comes and basically inhabits the body of the child on Earth. And there's no clear definition in most reincarnation teachings of when that occurs. In other words, some of them think that it occurs at the time of conception. Others believe it occurs at the time of birth. And in fact, historically, others believed it occurred at all different times in between, in fact. And in fact, there are some thoughts that it occurs at 3 months after conception and 2 months after conception. And there are all sorts of very loose ideas and concepts about the teaching. But basically the teaching is the person from the spirit world comes and inhabits the body of a person that's been created on Earth by parents and basically then lives their life on Earth. Now, of course, at some point they had to have a first incarnation. So at some point they had a first time they come. And then what happens is after they grow old, so they're old now, I don't know how to draw a stick figure old person, but anyway, let's say he's an old version now. Maybe he needs to be black. Maybe he's near death, so he's black, right? So he's now an old version of that. He dies. He goes back to some undefined location. And again, for many of the teachings, there's a wide variety of, suggestions of where that might be. He has some kind of, generally it's accepted that he has some kind of life review about the life he spent on Earth, right? And then, of course, he incurred certain amounts of what is classified as karma. In other words, he did some bad things while he was on Earth that he should be sorry for, but he wasn't. And so so now he's basically forced to go back to Earth again. And there's even the concept that we are neutral in gender in the spirit world, and we reincarnate as a male or a female, or a male or a female, and that we have many of these cycles. And in fact, books like the Conversations with God book suggest 700,000-800,000 cycles, and in fact many people who believe in the teaching of reincarnation believe that this is an infinite process, but many of them don't. Some of them believe that after you've done enough cycles and learnt enough things and actually have the last life being a loving life, in other words, you've paid all the karma, you then get to stay in the spirit world in a higher location somewhere, but nobody's really certain where that is or what happens there. And I'm not being facetious, I'm just saying that's what the case is, right? The case is it's a very, very loose theory about life, about what happens with life after death and also before death. But that's the general teachings of reincarnation. And we have many flavours of it. It started many thousands of years ago, actually, in terms of the first flavours that were introduced about reincarnation started many thousands of years ago. And they started with the concept, what they noticed was, and this is where we've got to be careful about what we noticed and then making assumptions. What they noticed was they had a child born, and sometimes the personality of that child was very similar to somebody who had died, right? And so they thought, well, the person who died must be that child again. That was the assumption. Right? Of course, there's a lot of other possible solutions to that particular problem, if you could call it a problem, but that was the underlying assumption. And there was also this concept that once one person breathed out their life, that breath of life would enter another. Does that make sense? And so there was this concept of the cycle of the breath of life that began in very, very olden philosophies, mostly around what you now know as the Indian continent today. The philosophies, a lot of times these philosophies were attributed to Egypt, but actually most people in Egypt never believed them. It was mostly people from the Eastern philosophies, which are more the Asian types of communities, and the Indian types of communities that believe these kind of belief systems. But as time has gone on, more and more people have become interested in the philosophy. And there are very good reasons for this, because more and more spirits have try reincarnating. And when I say try reincarnating, they can't actually reincarnate. So you know what they do? They overcloak children. They overcloak the body of children, which they see as their vessel that they can use to relive life on earth. Many of these spirits don't want to go to the spirit world for a lot of reasons. Some of them are about avoiding a lot of their darker emotions, and also avoiding a lot of the pain they've created in their life that they've just had on earth. And so what they do is they revisit the earth again, and they connect themselves, usually in the womb if the mum and dad allow it, but if not in the womb, as soon as the child is born, they connect to the body of the child, and they influence the child for the rest of its life. Right? So they actually live on earth with that child for the rest of its life.
So they're sucking energy.
Exactly, that's exactly what they're doing. They're sucking the life out of, and also influencing the will of, the next generation of children. That's what they're doing. All right? Now, the more they teach the belief of reincarnation, the more openness there is on earth to allowing this to occur. So in other words, teaching the belief of reincarnation supports these spirits to overcloak more and more children and then live their life on earth again through that child. So it's actually a very damaging teaching that causes a lot of damage to our children. And many parents accept it. Many parents accept it, particularly in Eastern philosophies, but now it's coming more and more into Western philosophy. And as a result, many people in the West are now accepting this. So many people in the West do not realise, but their openness to these kind of teachings allows spirits to overcloak their own children, and then those spirits live with their children the rest of their life. And a lot of times the parent's proud of that. The parent thinks it's a wonderful thing. And the children spout all of this wisdom, which is actually a spirit who's lived on earth before, who's in the spirit world, who've investigated some of these things, spouting their wisdom through the child.
Well, is that how a child...
You need to use the microphone.
Is that how a child...
Just closer so I can hear you.
Is that how a child could be like a musical prodigy at age 4?
Certainly. That's exactly how a child becomes a musical prodigy at age 4. Because the spirit overcloaking the child is a musical, it has been played music all of his life. Does that make sense? This is how you've got mathematical prodigies, musical prodigies. All of these kind of prodigies are actually, at the moment, not in the future this has to be, but at the moment, this is what's happening. There are these, because of these belief systems, there's these overcloaking of spirits occurring over the child, and so the spirit, of course, wants to pick up the musical instrument they used to play and play it. And of course, they know everything about it right from the beginning, right? They don't have to learn anything because they already know. That's the reality, they already know.